all use the word emergency in our day-to-day lives. What does emergency mean? It is an unexpected, serious or dangerous situation that arises which needs immediate or urgent attention or action. So we've also heard about the emergency ward in hospitals, where patients who are in critical condition are taken. So sometimes, similarly, the country also might be in a critical condition. During those times, it is called that the country is in an emergency. So let us study about what are the types of emergencies and when it can occur. So in the Indian Constitution, we have mention of 3 types of emergencies. The first type of emergency is an emergency caused by war or external aggression or armed rebellion, which is called the national emergency. The second type of emergency is emergency on account of the failure of constitutional machinery in the states. And the third type of emergency is the financial emergency. Have you heard about the Sino-Indian War 1962? It was a war that went on between India and China. And just like what happens in any war, fighting was going on between these two countries. On 20th October 1962, China launched attacks on India. And this became a security threat for India. India was concerned about its security and it understood that it had to impose an emergency. So during this time, on 26th October 1962, India declared an emergency due to threat of an external aggression. So similarly, during the Indo-Pakistani War 1971, there was a war between India and Pakistan. And India had to declare an emergency as there was a threat to its security. The third national emergency in India was declared in 1975. And this was a controversial declaration. So from 1973 to 1975, there was a lot of political unrest going on in India. There was a lot of mass protests and demonstrations. And on 25th June 1975, Indira Gandhi, who was the Prime Minister, declared an emergency. The grounds of this emergency was threat due to internal disturbance. So all of these 3 examples that we saw in the previous slide are examples of what we consider as national emergency. So let us talk about this national emergency. The Article 352 of our Constitution deals with national emergency. It says that if the President feels that there has been a grave emergency due to the country's security being under threat from war or external aggression or armed rebellion, then the President can declare a national emergency. So if the President feels that the security of the country is at stake due to an attack being centered around India, or if there is a revolt going on inside India where people are revolting with arms, such as the country might get destabilized, the President can impose the national emergency. So, the President can make a proclamation of national emergency if the security of India or any part of the country is threatened by war or external aggression or armed rebellion. What is a war? It is when a foreign country declares a formal war against India and there is a violent struggle using armed forces. Again, an external aggression can happen when a foreign country attacks India without any formal declaration of war. So a war is when there is a formal declaration of an attack, and when there is no formal declaration, it is called external aggression. Other than this, armed rebellion is when a group of people rebel against the government of India with arms and ammunitions, leading to the destruction of lives and property. So when the people take up arms and ammunitions and revolt against the government, then the national emergency can be declared because there is an armed rebellion. Now, when a national emergency is declared in the country, the federal states of the country cannot be seen individually. So, all the decisions and orders that are given by the union government or the central government are executed and implemented in the states as well. So, during an emergency, the federal structure of our country breaks down to some extent and the power is transferred in the hands of the union. The powers of the union therefore increase during an emergency. In this time, the union parliament can legislate on subjects of the state list. So, the union parliament, which is the representative of the central or union government, makes the laws and legislations on the subjects that are in the state list. So, which were actually supposed to be legislated on by the state. So, this is the first effect or impact of the declaration of a national emergency. Let us look at what the other effects can be. Now, our constitution has given to us certain fundamental rights, such as the right to equality or the right to freedom of speech and expression. But since there is an emergency, there is a larger concern at the hand of the union government. So, during this time, the fundamental rights guaranteed in the constitution are partially or wholly suspended. Now, for example, the constitution gives us the freedom to reside in any part of the country. But during an emergency, there is a crisis at hand and the people may not be able to move throughout the country freely or reside in any part of the country. So, the fundamental rights might be partially or wholly suspended. The constitution also gives us a right to constitutional remedies, which means that if our fundamental rights are taken away, then we can move the court. But since the fundamental rights are in itself suspended, the right to constitutional remedies is also suspended. But there are two exceptions. The right to constitutional remedies still is there for these two articles. So, the Article 20, which says that no person can be prosecuted and punished for the same offence more than once. And the Article 21, which says that no person shall be deprived of his life or personal liberty except according to a procedure established by the law. So, if these two fundamental rights are taken away from us, then we can still go to the court and get it back. The third effect for the proclamation of national emergency is that the life of the Lok Sabha may be extended. Now, we know that every 5 years, all citizens of the country who are above 18 years of age go and vote in the general elections. In this general election, the Lok Sabha members are elected. And the party which gets the majority chooses the Prime Minister of the country. So, in this type of election, since all the citizens of the country are involved, there is a huge public participation. There are also many arrangements that have to be made. So, when there is an emergency, since bringing together so many people are not possible, the Lok Sabha tenure, even if it's supposed to end, might be extended. So, the life of the Lok Sabha may be extended. But it can be extended only for 1 year at a time, and it cannot be extended beyond 6 months after the proclamation of emergency ends. Now, you can understand that there are a wide range of consequences to the proclamation of a national emergency. During the national emergency, the powers of the states and the individuals are considerably reduced, which makes the chances of an emergency being misused very high, since the states cannot question the union government's moves or the individuals cannot criticize the actions of the government. That is why the proclamation of emergency has to be approved by both of the houses of the parliament within 1 month of its proclamation by the president. So, the parliament, that is the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, has to approve the proclamation of emergency within 1 month of its declaration. If the Lok Sabha during this time has been dissolved and it is approved by the Rajya Sabha only, then after the Lok Sabha reconstitutes, it has to be approved by the Lok Sabha within 30 days. And the duration of a national emergency is 6 months at a time. When the 6 months are over and the national emergency needs to be extended, again the resolution process has to be followed for the proclamation of emergency to be extended. So the proclamation of national emergency can be imposed for 6 months at a time and again be renewed for the next 6 months, and this goes on. In India, we have a written constitution. It is the lengthiest constitution in the world. So all the functions and proceedings in the country go in accordance to the provisions of the constitution. In a society, if the constitution is not being followed, then there is no guarantee of the security of its citizens. So following the constitution is very important. This brings us to our next type of emergency, which is emergency due to failure of constitutional machinery in a state. In our constitution, Article 356 deals with the emergency due to failure of constitutional machinery in a state. What does the failure of constitutional machinery in a state means? So the failure of constitutional machinery meaning a situation in which the state cannot be administered in accordance with the provisions of the constitution. So when the president gets a report from the governor of a state or in some other way finds out that a state is not being run or administered in accordance to the provisions of the constitution, then he can declare this emergency in the state. Do you know that this type of emergency is also known as the president's rule? Why? Because when there is a failure of the constitutional machinery in a state, the union government takes a lot of functions and powers from the states, due to which the representative of the union, that is the president, takes some or all of the powers of the government of the state. Now let us talk about when there can be a failure in the constitutional machinery of the state. So the president's rule can be imposed when the state government loses majority because of a split in the party or because of the withdrawal of one of its coalition parties. Other than this, it can also be imposed when after the post-poll results, no party or coalition has got the clear majority to form the government. There can also be a situation where the chief minister tenders his resignation. Other than this, the president's rule might be imposed when there is a deteriorating law and order condition in the country due to the breaking out of ethnic clashes or communal riots or fights regarding religion. So during these times, the president's rule can be imposed. And all the powers that are generally with the governor are taken by the president. So that is why it is known as the president's rule. So during the president's rule, the union government has complete control over the states. As per a report from January 2016, this is the total number of times that the president's rule has been imposed in different states. Let us talk about the duration of the president's rule. The president's rule's duration is 2 months. After these 2 months, for the president's rule to continue, it has to be ratified by the parliament. So, if it is not ratified by the parliament, then the emergency ceases to operate. But if it is ratified by the parliament, then it can continue for 6 months from the date of issue. The president's rule can be extended after these 6 months for another 6 months. So the total duration of the president's rule is generally 1 year. But there are 2 circumstances under which the president's rule might be extended beyond 1 year. So the first one says that if a proclamation of emergency is in operation in India or in any part of the state. So if the president's rule is going on in a state and simultaneously there is an emergency which has been imposed in the country, or if during the continuance of the president's rule some ethnic clashes or violence or a revolt has broken out in a part of the state, then in these conditions the president's rule might be extended beyond 1 year. The second condition is that if the election commission declares that holding legislative assembly elections is difficult. But the president's rule cannot continue beyond 3 years. Now we'll be talking about the effects of the president's rule being imposed. So as we've seen that during a president's rule, the constitutional machinery of the state has broken down. In India, all actions of the government are in accordance to the provisions of the constitution. Do you think that if the constitution is not being followed, then the state legislatures or the state can make its own laws or take its own decisions? No, right? That is why the legislative assembly of the state may be dissolved or suspended by the president during the imposition of president's rule. So the laws on subjects that are under the state list are legislated on by the Union Parliament. The only powers that the president cannot suspend is that of the powers of the High Court. The High Court is the highest judicial authority in the state, and the High Court has to be present to administer justice or take care of any disputes that occur during this time. So that is why the powers of the High Court cannot be suspended. Other than this, the annual budget of the state is passed by the Union Executive. Since the Union Executive is legislating on all other matters of the state and has most powers of the state during this time, so the annual budget is also presented by the Union Parliament. The national emergency and the president's rule has been imposed in India several times. Do you know which emergency has not been imposed in India ever? It is the financial emergency. Article 360 of the Constitution deals with financial emergency. When the Constitution makers created the Constitution, they had already achieved the political freedom, but they were aware that without the gaining of economic freedom or stability in the economy and finance, the political freedom would make no sense. So they added the provisions regarding the financial emergency. So the financial emergency is declared when the financial stability or credit of India is threatened. Such an emergency can be imposed by the president when the country is not economically or financially stable. For example, if there is a lot of inflation in the country, the prices of all of the things have increased and the value of credit or the money has reduced to a lot of extent. If the country has been borrowing lot of money from different countries and is deeply under debt, then there might be a destabilization in the finance conditions of the country. So when the financial stability or credit of India is threatened, the president can impose the financial emergency. In 2020, when the COVID-19 crisis was going on, there were a lot of discussions within organizations and opposition parties regarding whether a financial emergency should be imposed. Why? Because during the COVID-19 crisis, India's economy fell because a lot of lockdowns had to be imposed and a lot of money had to be used for providing relief and medical care facilities to the people of the country. However, the financial emergency has never been imposed in India. Can you answer this question? Which type of emergency has never been proclaimed in India? Is it the national emergency, the emergency due to failure of constitutional machinery in a state, the financial emergency, or emergency due to internal disturbance? Yes, it is the financial emergency which till date has never been declared in India. Now let us talk about the effects of the financial emergency. In a financial emergency, since the stability is not there in the economy or financial conditions of the country, therefore there is a crisis regarding money. So the first effect of financial emergency is that the president has the power to reduce salaries and allowances of persons employed by the union government, including judges of the Supreme Court and the High Court. Other than this, the union government can also ask the states to reduce the salaries and allowances of public servants under the state. So the public servants who are under the union and the public servants who are under the state, their salaries and allowances might be reduced. And the third effect is that money bills passed by the state legislatures may be reserved for the president's consideration. So the union executive through the president can look over the division or allocation of taxes or revenues within the center and the states. Just like the president's rule, the financial emergency's initial duration is also 2 months. So, a proclamation declaring financial emergency must be approved by both houses of parliament within 2 months from the date of issue. That is, the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha both have to pass a resolution approving the financial emergency. Once approved by both the houses of parliament, the financial emergency continues indefinitely till it is revoked. So the president has to revoke the financial emergency, and the financial emergency, once approved by the parliament, will continue till it is revoked. So in this video, we've talked about what an emergency is, and we've talked about the 3 types of emergencies that are mentioned in the Constitution of India. The first is emergency due to war or external aggression or armed rebellion, which is known as the national emergency. The second one is an emergency due to failure of constitutional machinery in the state, which is also known as the president's rule. And the third one is the financial emergency. The national emergency has been declared 3 times in India. The president's rule has been declared several times in India. But it is the financial emergency which has till date never been imposed in the country. So these emergency provisions are included in the Constitution of India so that even in times of utter chaos and confusion, when the country is under threat, the people of the country and the country itself might be protected. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million-plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it is rewarding too. So register for free now.